This is the lecture for Wednesday, the 10th of February, 2020. And it is for European history. Wednesday the 10th? Yeah, it is Wednesday the 10th. Your notes should be out. And where we were was that Giuseppe Garibaldi, Joe Garibaldi, has just landed in, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. And he is marching north to try to unify southern Italy. And the Italian upper classes are nervous. Garibaldi looks like the poster boy for a wild-eyed revolutionary, unlike that blood-stained communist Che Guevara, who's the poster boy for revolution and radicalism today. Learn something about this guy before you wear his T-shirt. Garibaldi is known as somebody who believes in liberty and individual freedom and a republic, none of which the Italian upper classes want. So, young men, college students, the future of Italy, all from good families, well-spoken, respectable, go to the upper class latifundistas, the plantation owners, and the aristocrats and the business leaders, and they say quietly, don't worry about Garibaldi. In order for things to stay the same, everything must change. What is meant by that? What is meant by that? In order for things to remain the same, everything must change. In the context of Garibaldi, I said this as you were leaving yesterday. What does that mean? Yeah.
If you want to keep everything you have now, no, don't oppose us.
Right! Garibaldi may look like a wild-eyed revolutionary. He certainly appeals to the dangerous classes within society. But Garibaldi has already secretly pledged, and would soon publicly pledge, to bring the part of Italy that he brings under control, under the dominion of the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia, and the House of Savoy, and the king, Victor Emmanuel II, which is what happens. So southern Italy joins with Garibaldi, and Piedmont, Sardinia, which now controls the north of Italy, moves into Tuscany and the eastern Papal States. And Italy is unified in the 1860s by a combination of Garibaldi's revolution, but primarily by the Count de Cavour's diplomacy, inspired by Mazzini's nationalism. So now only the area around Rome, the very western Papal States and the Tiber River Valley, remains under papal authority. And you'd think that this would be an effective compromise. The Italians have their nation, the Pope still has his country, but no. What's the capital going to be? Milan? Venice? Naples? The only capital fit for a unified Italy is Rome, where the Pope lives. This is going to be a problem. During the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871, there is, in fact, a resumption of the war against the Papal States. The armies of Italy surround Rome, which has walls at this time, and begin battering down with cannon those walls. The forces of the Pope are overthrown, and the Italian armies move up to, but not into, the papal palace on the top of Vatican Hill. They remain outside the papal palace grounds itself, and outside the grounds of St. Peter's Cathedral, the great cathedral built by Bramante, whose beautiful plaza was designed by Michelangelo, including the Sistine Chapel, where all that Michelangelo art is also present. Michelangelo. There's a word. I don't know if it's a real word or not, but it's fun to say. So, what is to be done with the Pope? Well, from 1871 until the 1920s, when Mussolini's regime negotiates the Lateran Accords. You can say what you want about Mussolini. He actually ends the struggle between Italy and the Roman Catholic Church, which is a seriously dangerous struggle. The Pope calls himself to the world the prisoner of the Vatican, surrounded by a hostile nation state that has taken his country. And the fear is that at any moment those Italian troops that halted at the border of the papal compound can return and march in and make the Pope physically their prisoner, turning the Roman Catholic Church into a puppet of the Italian government. The Pope has been wronged. The Roman Catholic Church has been maligned. I am a prisoner of the Vatican. And for over half a century, this is the status quo. And considering that most Italians are deeply Roman Catholic, especially at this time, this causes tensions. However, the Roman Catholic Church is not going to take this lying down. They convene the Vatican Council, which we know today as Vatican Council I. And in the Vatican Council, the cardinals and bishops and scholars of the Roman Catholic Church of the early 1870s give the Pope something in return for the loss of his state, something that will intensify a reverence for his august authority. It is the doctrine of papal infallibility. Now, to be infallible means you are literally incapable of concluding wrongly. What does this mean? Well, first of all, it's limited to religious teaching. If the Pope says, I like veal cutlets more than I like lasagna, that is not an infallible papal decision. Although they're both good. The Pope, if he is pronouncing as a religious teacher on doctrine, on theology, after praying upon it, being the vicar of Christ, uniquely imbued with a role and a responsibility by God himself, given the keys of St. Peter, which is on the flag of the Vatican City state, which exists today. And what do those keys mean? They refer to a statement after the return of Jesus from the dead, before his rising up into heaven. Jesus says to Peter, who is the rock upon which he will build his church, Peter being the first recognized Christian, being the first who would publicly say that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God, that what you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven, and what you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven. This creates the popular image that when you die, you go to the pearly gates. And these are literal gates. And at the gates is St. Peter in a booth. He liked booths. He wanted to build a booth for Jesus and some of the returning prophets when he went to the mountaintop, the Mount of Transfiguration. Anyway, Peter is there, and you all go up to Peter in line, and Peter weighs your sins against your virtues and gives you God's decision about whether you go to the happy place or the hot place. What you permit on earth is permitted in heaven. What you deny on earth, forbid on earth, is forbidden in heaven. The keys of St. Peter are literally the keys to paradise. Peter is the doorman of heaven. And what this has to do with is the teaching authority of the Christian faith. Does the Christian faith say that Gentiles can become Christians without first becoming Jews? Well, under Paul's influence, they say yes. That therefore becomes doctrine of all mainline Christians. I don't know of a single mainline Christian group that denies that a Gentile can directly become a Christian without first passing through the doorway of Judaism. The same is true for decisions relating to human life. What should Lent be? What does Easter mean? What does Christmas mean? Where does life begin? What does it mean, thou shalt not kill? What are the duties of a Christian? And all these other things. The church, and now the many denominations of the Christian faith, all weigh in on these matters. And they all speak with the authority as the heirs of St. Peter, what you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven, and so forth. Well, Roman Catholics believe that the Pope is literally as direct an heir to St. Peter as you can get, because Peter's last role, before he was executed by Nero, was to be the Bishop of Rome, the leader of Rome's Christians. And thus Rome, even though it is not the holy city of Jerusalem, is considered a holy city because Peter dies there, Paul dies there, and is the center of the world for many hundreds of years. So the Bishop of Rome is always considered to be one of the leaders of the Christian faith. Before the fall of the Roman Empire, there's the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. There's also the Patriarch of Constantinople. There is the Archbishop of Antioch. There is the leader of the faith in Jerusalem. And there is the leader of the faith in Alexandria. So all of these patriarchates and the Pope are the leaders of the Christian faith. And 4 of the 5 are in the East. Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. So even from earliest times, the Pope was considered to be a particularly special authority. As Western Christendom develops, it is the strong papacy built by Leo the Great and Gregory the Great, Gregory being the first Benedictine Pope, which becomes the mote of dust around which the water vapor of the Western civilization we're all a part of coheres. The Christian faith being the only thing that is inherited directly from ancient times without collapsing. So the Christian faith for all of this medieval period is as strong or stronger than any national leader, depending upon the moment. Unique in world civilizations, you don't have a unitary imperial authority which controls both church and state. In the West, you've got 2 separate authorities, and this leads to the development of human rights, among other things. In their competition with one another, both sides profess ideas that end up leading to liberty in different ways. So, what does infallibility mean? Well, the Vatican Council, the First Vatican Council, Vatican I, determines that because of his role, the Pope is incapable of any theological error. That if the Pope prays on something, God will provide him with a true illumination, with genuine insight that will allow the Pope to speak with an undeniable and absolute authority. This is something that popes implied in the past, but it was not explicitly said until Vatican I in the 1870s. And it was said in order to give the Pope something in return for the loss of his country. Now, the way infallibility works is, it's not whether the Pope likes veal more than lasagna. It's in very particular cases that the Pope asserts his teaching authority. It's not something that's done often. It's like the obey clause in a wedding. Every couple is different. My wife and I are both very traditional, very conservative people. We've always been. So when we got married in July of 1990, she took and I took traditional vows. I vowed to love, honor, and cherish. She vowed to love, honor, and obey. Now, you modern women and men might think, oh my God, that's so horrible. Well, again, every couple is different. And one of the wisdoms I've learned over the years is not to judge how another couple runs their family. Because if it works, it's a pretty special thing in this world of broken home and divorce. And ours, by God's grace, works. Does the obey clause mean that I get everything I want? That we always watch the movies I want and always have go out to dinner where I want? We always make the big decisions in life where I want? Are you crazy? No, of course not. Here's what it means. It means that if anything goes wrong, it's my fault because I have the final call. With important matters, we discuss, we deliberate, but we don't compete. In our relationship, the idea of a husband and wife playing sexual politics with one another, where you decide, is boy better or girl better? No, we work as a team. And in that team, there is a hierarchy of responsibility. And being traditionalists, I'm at the top of the hierarchy, which means, again, if something goes wrong, it's on me. Now, what effect did this have when we first got married? Well, it helped me grow up because I was now responsible for another person's life. She had given that trust to me. And so I tried to live worthy of that. Leadership, if you appreciate it maturely, is not about your ego. It's not about you getting to have your say all the time. Genuine leadership, if you care about doing it well, is about being responsible enough to try to be there for the people that trust you. A good military officer will always see to the needs of his men before himself. A good political leader will always try to do what's best for the country, not what's best for themselves or their party. And this is true of any form of leadership. So papal infallibility is not about the Pope getting to say, I'm right because God makes me right all the time. It is about a special teaching authority that is supposed to end disputes. And it is also supposed to grant the Pope dignity that he might not otherwise have because he is in such a vulnerable position as relates to the state of Italy. So Italian unification, the risorgimento, is achieved, and 50, 55 years later, the Pope and the Italian government come to terms. And those terms are still honored. They were negotiated by Mussolini, but they're still honored. That the Vatican City is its own state, it's its own country. It has its own post office. I don't think it has its own currency. It has its own diplomatic service. That Vatican City, which is the Papal Palace neighborhood, and a few other places throughout Italy, are the popes. They are not part of the Italian nation. And therefore, in World War II, for example, when the Germans occupied Italy, they never went into the papal state. They never went into Vatican City. Yes?
I think there's a thing that, like, in the Vatican, there's a single ATM in the entire world that you can, like, use, and, like, one of the languages on it is Latin. It's the only ATM in the entire world that you can, like,
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this one.
Now the Pope the Pope does have a bit of an army. These are the Swiss guards, and they have been his ever since the Renaissance and Reformation. Basically, the Swiss send volunteers who are Roman Catholic to Rome. And if you go to Rome, or if you see pictures or films about it, you'll see these guys walking around with halberds and breastplates and like conquistador-style helmets. Well, they also have submachine guns and ballistic body armor, and they are big, tough, very capable fighting men. At various times in the past, the Swiss Guards have fought, and in some cases, like in the 1528 or 29 attack by the Emperor Charles V, they died to a man fighting for the Pope. Sabaton has a song about it, which I'm not going to play now because of time, but I may reference it in today's online thing. So, any questions about Italia before we go to Germania? Okay. The unification of Germany is summed up in a quote by Otto von Bismarck, who you'll learn about. Let's see if I get it right, because it's in your notes. It is not by speeches in parliaments that the great issues of our time will be decided, but by iron and blood. Eisen und Blut. Eisen und Blut. What this is translated as is blood and iron. For some reason, they get transposed. Blut und Eisen. And when you hear people talk about blood and iron diplomacy, they are talking about using warfare in a Clausewitzian way. Von Clausewitz is the great Western master of the theory of war, just as Sun Tzu is in the East. Sun Tzu's book is more famous now, The Art of War, and it deals with a Confucian approach to war that is about balance and allowing the enemy to retreat and things like that. Von Clausewitz is much more Western. War is diplomacy by other means. War is diplomacy by other means. It's national policy by other means. And von Clausewitz style war is not about balance. It's not about allowing your enemy to retreat to reduce casualties. It's about securing victory quickly and brutally at all costs. So, Blut und Eisen, blood and iron diplomacy, is a diplomacy that is willing to use the military and every other means to achieve its goal. So, let's go through this. Otto von Bismarck is the key figure in the unification of Germany. Is he a king? He is a Prussian Junker. It's spelled Junker. But and when I was a kid, of course, I thought, how is it that the Germans are dominated by this guy that runs a junkyard? A junker? Come on. And it's the same thing that when I was a kid, I wondered why Germans were sick all the time, because, disease, Germans. Otto von Bismarck is a Junker, an East Elbian Junker. Now, the Elbe River is about here. So east of the Elbe is this area here dominated by the heart of Prussia. Now, I guess I'll start out. I'll get to it. So, hold off on Bismarck. I'm going to follow my outline. Okay, Germany before unification. You have here a map that has several layers. Before 1800, the German region, like the Italian region, is dominated by the Holy Roman Empire, which, again, Voltaire famously says is neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But as German nationalism is sparked by the occupation of the Rhineland by Napoleon, here's basically the Rhine River. It arises in Switzerland. It includes on its left bank, its western bank, Alsace-Lorraine, which is German culturally but French politically after Louis XIV. And then there's this area here, which is called the Rhineland. It is the area of Germany west of the Rhine River. And then the Rhine flows through Holland and debouches into the North Sea. Well, in Napoleon's time, the Rhine River is the border of France, except for Holland. Holland is also part of France. So you have massive region of heavily populated German areas under French dominion, and this rankled. And that's why the Rhine plays a very special role in German nationalism. Wagner has the Rhine gold at the center of his ring cycle of operas. Gold from the Rhine River is used to form the ring of the Nibelungen, another ring story from Nordic myth, not Tolkien's story, but related to Tolkien's story, and that it is magical. It deals with fantasy and dragons, and there's a magic ring that can make you, among other things, invisible. So, German nationalism is sparked by the occupation of the Rhine, and also by the French dominion, and by the creation of the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. And the Germans also are not stupid. They learned from the French this thing called nationalism. They learned that if you believe that you're a nation of destiny with a common heritage and a common future, you can do all sorts of things that are like super powerful. So the Germans rise up to reclaim the Rhineland. And German nationalism is a big deal in the overthrow of Napoleon. But as you can see, Germany is not a single nation. Let's take a look. The Alsace-Lorraine region is part of France at this time. The Rhineland is German. So is northwestern Germany, the Emden region, the Jade Estuary, and Bremerhaven, Hamburg, and Hanover, which used to be British. The British royal family at that time came from Hanover in northwestern Germany. Prussia ends up taking over this land and the Ruhr Valley. And the Ruhr Valley is an industrial region east of Holland. It's going to be the heart of German industry. German lands include Baden, Württemberg, Bavaria, the great South German states, Bavaria being the greatest. Capital of Bavaria is Munich, where they have Oktoberfest. The mountains make Bavaria beautiful. Saxony, where Luther comes from, and where Marx comes from. You've got a variety of minor states that are between Baden-Württemberg, Prussia, Saxony, and Alsace-Lorraine, all through the center of Germany. German cultural regions live under the Danish king in Schleswig-Holstein. German regions go east into the land of the Prussians. Prussia is now considered German. And the Germans also live in an extensive part of the Austrian Empire, later to be called the Austro-Hungarian Empire, including the Sudetenland, the heart of Austria around Vienna, and the area near Innsbruck over here. So Germany exists, but it is also politically divided, and it has been politically divided because the Holy Roman Empire was not a strong, centralized state. So what kind of German nation are we going to set up? Well, one is expressed in the German national anthem, the original version, Deutschland über alles. It's a Großdeutschland idea. Großdeutschland means Greater Germany. Großdeutschland Germany includes Austria, along with all the other Germans. Well, let's look at the name Austria. Austria comes from the German words Österreich. Österreich means Eastern Empire. Eastern Reich Empire. So Österreich, Eastern Empire. The Austrians are German. They speak German. They wear lederhosen. They have Oktoberfest. They're German. They're German in every way you want to measure it. They're ethnically German, culturally German, German. So Großdeutschland would include all the Germans in Central Europe that are living in this contiguous region. However, the Austrian emperor doesn't just rule over Germans, does he? If you look at the map, you will see Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Hungarians, Romanians, Italians, Slovenes, Serbs, Croats. Basically, the center of Europe into the Balkans are ruled by the German House of Habsburg and the Austrians. The Hungarians in particular want to have their own nation. This is going to make a lot of history. So if we adopt a Großdeutschland, Greater Germany model, what do we do about the rest of Austria's empire? Do we strip the empire away from Austria and have a bunch of weak independent countries near us? Or do we give it to the Hungarians? What do we do? I mean, the Austrians have worked hard for this empire. So that's a problem. If you get rid of the empire, you're punishing the Austrian Germans by taking away their national project. If you keep the other nationalities, then you don't have a German nation. It's not German. It's a polyglot, multinational thing, and that's not what a national state is supposed to be. So then there's a Kleindeutschland model. Kleindeutschland means Little Germany. So if you know anyone named Klein, their name actually means little. Kleindeutschland is Lesser German. Kleindeutschland is going to include the German regions that are not part of Austria. Now, if we were to adopt, nationalists say, a Großdeutschland model, then the Austrians would probably dominate. But if we keep the Austrians out, Prussia will dominate. And that's a concern. I mean, Austria is Catholic. Austria is expansive enough to effectively run a multinational empire. The Austrians tend to not be so particularly warlike. They like music. I mean, Beethoven, Mozart. These are all Viennese people or people who made their name in Vienna. Austria is sort of sophisticated German. Prussia has a very different history. We're going to flash forward a little bit. In the Middle Ages, the German nation extended to about here, basically about where Berlin is. East of this area was dominated by Slavic peoples, like the Poles, like the Lithuanians, like the Latvians and the Russians, and the White Russians, the Belarusians. Among these were two pagan groups, the Lithuanians and the Prussians, the Prus. The Prus and the Lithuanians retained their paganism to past the year 1000, which is not normal. In Europe, the ante that you pay for being a part of Western civilization is you become Christian. That's what happened to the Vikings. They became Christian and they became no longer a danger. The same thing with the Magyars, who were the Hungarians. Before they became Christian, they were raiders in Central Europe. Afterwards, they were peaceful people within Europe. Becoming Christian is the ante that you pay to join the game that is Western civilization. Well, neither the Prus nor the Lithuanians were going to play that game willingly. They were under, at this time, the Kingdom of Poland, Lithuania. Now, Poland, Lithuania was going to handle the Lithuanian side. But what about the Prus? What about these swamp-dwelling pagans? Well, the Pope decides that we are going to have the Great Northern Crusade. And in the Great Northern Crusade, Crusader Knights are going to be recruited to Christianize these lands by reason or force. It'll be force. And a new order of knights is established to lead this crusade called the Teutonic Knights. These are the German knights. The Teutonic means German. So the Teutonic Knights are recruited from all over the Holy Roman Empire, and a few from beyond. And their job is given to them by not only the Pope, but by the King of Poland, to take over these lands for Christ. So the Teutonic Knights come in, knights in shining armor, and they begin to fight the swamp pagans. The struggle takes a couple of 100 years. It is not an easy war. The Prus are tough customers, and they are brutal, and they fight hard. The Poles can't handle them. The Teutonic Knights ultimately do. So the creation of the Teutonic Knights is as a conquering society of militant crusaders who take over and rule over an underclass of former pagans who are Christianized by the sword. These guys keep that attitude, the attitude of a church militant who is willing to use force in the name of God. The Teutonic Knights then conquer parts of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and they rule an empire nominally under the King of Poland, but they end up taking a bunch of Polish territory as well. They fight a great battle with the city of Novgorod when it's under Mongol rule, and there is the battle on the ice from the movie Alexander Nevsky, which we saw last, you weren't here with me last year, which we saw earlier this year. I think at the beginning of the year. Great black and white battle. You've got the Alexander Nevsky, who is Stalin because it was made in 1938, And you got this great battle on the ice between the knights and the heroic Russian people. One of the best propaganda films ever made. If you've never seen it, look up Alexander Nevsky. It's black and white. It's in Russian. It's got subtitles, but it's an amazing film. It's also with the music of Prokofiev, the world's first music video. So that entire battle scene is dominated by his music. Eventually, the Teutonic Knights are kicked out of the Baltic states, and they establish a marriage alliance between themselves and the kingdom of the Margravate of Brandenburg, whose capital is Berlin. The Hohenzollerns end up becoming the dominant force in Brandenburg, Prussia. Eventually, Prussia becomes a kingdom. Eventually, Prussia spreads into northwest Germany as well, and the Rhineland. The Junkers are the heart of it, because the Junkers are the soul of Prussia. The Junkers are the descendants of the knightly families that first settled. In this country, we have a society called the Daughters of the American Revolution, DAR. I don't know if you've ever met or encountered that term, but DAR refers to a woman or a girl who can trace their lineage back to a family that was part of the American Revolution. There are other people back east who make a big deal about being lineal descendants of people on the Mayflower. And they form these little para-aristocracies amongst themselves. Well, the Junkers are not a para-aristocracy. They are the heart of the aristocrats east of the Elbe. They become Protestant Lutherans during the Reformation, and they are hardcore militarists. Prussian militarism is synonymous. That basically you can't be Prussian without being a militarist. You can't be a militarist without being a Prussian. In a traditional, well-mannered society, which we are not, when a lady entered the room, all the gentlemen would stand. In fact, if you see an old movie about NASA and the Apollo moon missions, you'll see one of the astronauts show up, and all of the engineers at the control stations will stand out of respect. Not for the person exactly, but for the institution of motherhood, of wife, of family. You show respect for women. You don't curse around women. You don't treat women like one of the guys. They are ladies. You treat them specially, like a lady. Not in Prussia. I mean, in Prussia they had ladies, and ladies were treated reasonably well. People didn't stand when a lady entered the room. When an officer entered the room, they stood. Everyone stood. A military officer, an army officer commanded that kind of respect. Everyone in the society would stand. Prussia is the modern Sparta. It is a state defined by its army. It has no natural resources. Its land is sandy and swampy simultaneously. What it has are its men. It's fighting men. And the fighting men of Prussia become man for man some of the best soldiers in modern times. For a Prussian Junker like Otto von Bismarck, looking out at the world, there are so many problems that can be solved by war. And war is going to be a method chosen, not just for the Risorgimento in Italy, it's going to be central to the unification of Germany. Okay. Let's see. So I think now we will engage in some meetings, which means I'm going to need to get the control to the projector. With people in bed, close the shades, please. Turn off the
Someone's
lights.
hiding behind your back. We even plug it.
See how many ads we have. I have YouTube Premium myself, but I'm not signed in on this computer. So, let's see. Okay. So, let us see. We'll give this a try. We'll see if it has English subtitles. By the way, that mustachioed guy is supposed to be Bismarck. We're going to be talking about him. But it makes references to several rivers, which we're going to show on the map. So let me take a look. If it doesn't have English lyrics, it's the German national anthem.
Deutschland, Deutschland, überall alles in der Welt. Wenn es steht zum Schutz und Trutze, brüderlich zusammenhält. Von der Maas bis an die Gegend. Von der Etsch bis an den Welt.
Okay, I'm pausing it because I want you to see where we're talking about here. So here's the map. Okay, the Meuse River is over here in the Rhineland. It is actually flows into France and was the site of several World War I battles featuring the American Marines, the Meuse. So the Memel. The Memel is up here beyond the Eagle, and it forms the border between East Prussia and Lithuania, the Memel. So from the Meuse River to the Memel, from the something to the Aegees, the Etsch. Okay, the Etsch is up here with Denmark, and the Adige is actually down on the border between Italy and Austria. The Adige. So Liszt, Franz Liszt, who writes this, has a Großdeutschland in mind. This is the German cultural region that includes Austria. And those borders are certainly not the borders of Germany today.
Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles in der Welt. Deutsche Frauen, deutsche Treue, deutsche Wein und deutscher Sang sollen in der Welt behalten ihren alten, schönen Klang. Und zu jeder Tat begeistern unser ganzes Leben lang. Deutsche Freude, deutsche Freude, deutscher Wein und deutscher Sang. Deutsche Freude, deutsche Freude, deutscher Wein und deutscher Sang.
Now, post-World War II, when Germans sing the national anthem, they only sing this verse, the third verse. The first two verses are considered too redolent of nationalism, Prussian militarism, and the Nazis. So if you are among Germans, this is the verse that you will hear today.
Und Recht und Freiheit Und Recht und Freiheit sind des Glückes Unterpfand.
Now, as for the Rhine River, let's see. Here. And haven't seen the commercial yet.
You get in the car and I just like make to the German accent.
The opening of Wagner's Ring Cycle, which consists of 4 operas: the Prelude, which is Das Rheingold, the Rheingold, followed by Die Valkyrie, which is the Valkyrie, Siegfried, and Götterdämmerung, which is the Twilight of the Gods, is Das Rheingold, which is the story of the 3 Rhine maidens and their guarding of the Rhine treasure, and the arrival of a dwarf who wants to steal it from them. Let's see.
I like it Canadian.
Okay, fine. Hold up. Okay. Looking for a circular version, but I didn't have time before class. So, just see if this has what we want.
Oh, the student does some.
I'm going to try to get us to a point where we are past the overture. There are 3 Rhine maidens who they name. There's the rude dwarf. They have one job. Guard the door.
Tauchtet ihr nieder mit euch, tolltote Nächte der Liebe sich gern. Mit uns will ich spielen, es ist verstorben. Sie scheint im Schimmer ihr hell und schön, wie die Erdungsschläge schlanken Beine euch an, schlägst der Holz in der Plan. Der Wald ist verlässt aus, wir uns kennen. Sie neigt sich heran.
Okay. Didn't really have much time for that, but the Rhine maidens are going to tease the dwarf and think that they're winning him over and making fun of him, but he will steal their gold, and that will be the gold that makes the ring. Thank you. Come again.
You have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Watch the videos at home.